With IT emerging as the key driver of growth for companies across the globe, IT security has become one of the biggest challenges of our times. Paladion Security Summit 2013, in association with Bloomberg TV India, saw the CISOs and CTOs of India's top companies come together to discuss and address the various security concerns that are faced by enterprises today. The event saw a power-packed discussion that dealt with topics such as the complex role of the CISO, protecting enterprises, and the need for security to be an intrinsic part of every organization.
Let me begin with a little story. The story is actually an American story attributed to the Dutch, and it's about a little boy who saves Netherlands. And what he does is he sees a little leak in one of the dikes. The dikes are walls built to keep the sea away from the land. So the little boy sees a little leak in the dike, and he puts his little finger to plug the dike, and that's how you get the idiom, to plug the dike, to put a finger in the dike. And he plugs the dike and he saves the country. And I see the job of the CISO and the CTO, pretty much the whole thing. You're trying to hold the entire infrastructure in place by constantly wondering where there's a leak. You're trying to plug and ensure that the entire security infrastructure is robust and strong. And the security infrastructure is really not something, in my opinion, something that you can review, let's say, once a quarter or once half a year. It really needs to be something that is integrated into the DNA of your business so that it's a daily, hourly activity as well. But is this understanding something that the Indian C-suite has understood and acknowledged that security is a second-by-second thing?
No, I think security has come a long way in terms of where we were 5 years back and where we are now. I think it's in the news. As a consumer, you experience it, and you're reading about it, and so having a perception about it. As a corporate, you are looking at how information is becoming very important, and everything is computerized. So automation is driving that, and so I think, and we have also seen the threat landscape. So clearly, it's a clear issue, and security is mainstream. It's no longer in the periphery and nice to have or a compliance requirement, but something which is a business driver and a business enabler. And I think that resonates with what the current mindset of the C-suite level is, in terms of what their expectations are, and what their sponsorship is in terms of getting this issue handled, and we actually ensure that we have right controls and procedures in place to make sure we are able to control this problem.
Ms. Rao, is that something you would broadly agree with?
Yes, I would, particularly for the financial services area. Your question is, is the C-suite properly, apprised of information security? I would say financial services, given the direct impact, it's definite. It is fairly mature. It's not version 1 of the sort of governance or compliance out there. It has matured over the last several years. Perhaps this may not be as true in other industries, manufacturing or things like that. But, and I think we've also been gently assisted by our regulator. The RBI has made good and sure that the guidelines, are pretty explicit about what they require in the information security area. So I would definitely say the board and the senior management is well apprised of the need for information security.
Within the financial space as well, Vishal?
Yes, absolutely. I, of course, tend to agree with what Vishal and Aruna have shared. Clearly, there is a lot of refined understanding of the various issues that can come up, arising out of technology vulnerabilities or arising out of external threats. That is very well understood by senior management now. Okay. And it's not as if one needs to kind of tell them what are the threats out there. A lot of things are already out there happening. While as a country, India has been relatively secure so far. We read and hear about a lot of things which are happening in the Western world. And most of our organizations have presence outside. So a lot of visibility on the events which are happening, plus the way the technology itself has been changing, has led to a heightened awareness about what security threats can come to be, and definitely the understanding.
So within the financial space, you do have the RBI pushing you as well, and you said, this is not version 1, you've evolved in, and that's a financial space, but if you were to look at the larger industry as such, is that a common trend?
I would say that it's a mixed picture. There is a certain inchoate kind of feeling that security issues are important, information security issues. But I don't know if the senior management really understands what kind of issues are there. I mean, obviously there's a broad understanding. So in financial services, definitely guided by the regulator, and because so much of business now depends on technology, there is definitely a better understanding. But if you look at other areas, probably the same understanding may not be there. And of course, all these episodes which happen, Snowden being the latest, I think there is an increasing awareness, but I would say it is inconsistent.
We're talking about awareness of issues on one front, but I'd like to talk about the role of the CISO and the CTO on a much macro scale as well. As a CISO, as a CTO, you're juggling a number of things. You're juggling performance, obviously. You have your shareholders. Effectively, at some level, you're also responsible for answering to your shareholders. You're looking at daily operational issues. You're looking at the brand as a larger picture. Has the CISO, CTO been accorded this kind of a special place within organizations, or do you think this is still a way to go before organizations are largely going to acknowledge and respect the fact that the CISO is doing more than just trying to, close the loopholes in the system? Let's get you in on this, Subhash.
Definitely. I think there is definitely a very good appreciation and understanding of the responsibility a CISO carries. I'll just pick up a cue from what Aruna was saying a little earlier. In the last 2 years, there has been a thrust from the regulator to have very, very high-level committees at the board level who need to focus on issues such as information security. So a lot of communication to these high-powered committees gets channelized through the CISO, through the members of the senior management. So there is definitely a heightened appreciation, and I would think the necessary importance and relevance that is associated with the CISO's role is definitely there, and I can speak for the financial services space. But I would tend to agree with Dr. Sarvade, with in some of the other sectors where the threats are perhaps not as pronounced as they are in the banking space. The level of recognition and importance perhaps is not up to the desired level.
Okay. Would you like to comment on this?
I think as an expectation in terms of leadership level, I think the role is there clearly has a mandate, and I think obviously also there's a great opportunity to play the value addition role in terms of the problem that we have in security. I think there is clearly a need to have the right level of leadership being attracted towards the role of a CISO, so that we are able to A, exploit that opportunity, and B, deliver that mandate. So I guess that is where there's some work to be done to get everybody play the same role at a leadership level. We still have certain CISOs who are at an operational level, and so they're not able to really get the mandate that is required for them to do the job that is, because it is about juggling various aspects, starting from strategy, engaging with the regulator, giving the assurance to the customers, stakeholders, and there's so many different vendor communities and partners whom you need to engage on an ongoing basis, apart from giving a vision and a direction to your team to lead and drive the vision that we have for the security. So it's clearly a leadership role. It is clearly seen as such in organizations who have security as a problem statement. And but we would need more leaders to be able to take that opportunity and drive that mandate.
Mr. Sarvade, what Vishal says, how complex is this problem? How big is the lack of leadership issue within the CISO space?
I think these are all new roles in some sense.
The CRO, absolutely, yeah.
So I think people are growing into these roles, and there are clearly industry leaders who will be on par with business leaders also in the security space. But in general, I think as teams start handling problems and as they acquire experience and formal qualification, I think organizations need to focus on development of leadership attributes of people who are going to be given these roles internally, so that there are second line of succession and so on. I think work needs to be done there. I'm seeing a lot of CISOs doing great work, but in general, or in some cases, probably some handholding by the management may be necessary.
How much of handholding are you doing? How complex is this issue for you?
There are mature organizations which have internal leadership development programs. And I remember a scenario where we did a quality improvement program as well. So I think these incremental things are going on. But in terms of academic courses or internal development programs, these are something which probably need to be beefed up.
Sure. Ms. Rao?
Yeah, I think I agree with my colleagues that this CISO role has now been established. The formal role, the reporting, the organization structure, the formal part of it is well established. It's been there now, say, 4 or 5 years at least. What still continues to evolve is the way the CISO interacts with the other departments.
Right. Okay.
Which I think is a little bit of what Vishal was saying. And that really depends on each organization, the individual CISO, how he or she, works it through. So I think that part is really evolving as we work through.
If you could also come in on this, what can be done to make the CISO's role far more smoother? In other words, what are the bottlenecks to a CISO, CTO's smooth operationing?
The two different roles. Let's not, when we're talking about the CISO,
yeah.
So I don't think there are real bottlenecks. It's the question is of making sure that information security becomes a part of the whole organization, firm's fabric. Since I'm from the technology, it's important to say that it doesn't get restricted to an IT security kind of role.
Right.
So the whole part is about how we can disseminate the responsibility to the rest of the organization. It's not one individual called a CISO, who's entrusted with the security across the whole, organization. So you need to have different, shall I say, initiatives or forums. And I'll just take a minute to plug what we've done at the bank. We have started an initiative, we call it Aristi. It is not a technology initiative. It's an initiative to get the whole organization involved in information security. It could be security of, say, hard copy document lying on somebody's desk. It could be physical security, tailgating into an office, all of these things, right? So we've set up a role called a BISO, Business Information Security Officer. And each business has nominated one person, and it's his job to inculcate this culture, if you will, into that unit. And these kind of things helps the CISO to push down that knowledge, attitude, understanding of information security.
Okay. Subhash?
Yes, to a great extent, yes, there is a lot of appreciation. Also, culturally, I tend to agree with her. There is a lot of efforts which need to be taken both ways. It's not just the organization which needs to take the initiatives. In fact, one of the primary responsibilities of a CISO is to ensure that responsibility for information security is not nested and controlled within the unit of the information security function.
Okay.
Truly, information security awareness and propagating the culture of awareness and protecting the security can happen only if every business unit and indeed every individual in the organization is A, aware of the various issues and threats which are there, and B, make small contributions in whatever form and manner are possible, which will help the larger cause. Okay. So to a great extent, a lot of that initiative has to be driven by people like us. And once people are aware and appreciative of the efforts, I'll just take an example to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to say.
Please.
We've been trying to do an initiative in our organization for promoting awareness about phishing. Okay. Phishing is, as we all know, customers get entrapped in phishing in various ways. Now, within organization, an organization like ours has got a lot of churn, 3 or 4 years, and there is a whole set of new people who come in. So it's constantly one needs to make people aware of what are the various things that need to be done to protect against phishing and so on and so forth. And once we've done this, we've done 2 or 3 rounds of it so far. People have come back to us from far corners of the organizations, appreciating that they were not aware of this. This has helped them stop so and so things. We've got incidents which have got stopped thanks to vigilance of people who had nothing to do with the information security function.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's both ways.
So go beyond the mandate of just information security and look beyond as well. So Arvind, could I get you in on here? You look at the industry from bird's eye view out there as well. What are the regular challenges that CISOs have to grapple with in order to go about their effective functioning?
So probably I'm not the best person to answer this question because CISOs probably Vishal and Suresh will have some take on that. But what I've seen from fraud domain, which I used to handle, is that a lot of decision making is crisis driven. So if there is a crisis, you get a mind share, then rest of the time it is business as usual. So I think there are a lot of back-end activities which have to be carried out regularly. If the management is supportive and you have got a good plan to execute, I think it gets done. But many times, large investments in technology and so on will get done if there is a crisis which brings about the need for that. So I think it comes back to the same thing of how aware the senior management is. I would think that the decision making remains by and large, from what I see across the industry, more reactive than anything else.
Vishal, I'd like you to come in on this, the problem precisely of reactive decision making versus proactive decision making. There are pluses and minuses on both fronts. I mean, if you're reactive, there's less time consumption, more flexibility for you to play around with. If you're being proactive, early identification and far more structured. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg, really. How do you start?
I think clearly you need to start by being proactive, and that's really what's in your hand. You need to have a program which is long drawn, engaging the whole stakeholders, and you keep improving your compliance and your readiness towards addressing the problem. But I think security has come a long way in terms of what we were and where we are today. And in today's world, the security folks are talking about both strategies, equally important, because you can't be taking a position of saying that you won't have any attacks if you are extremely proactive, because you always need to do a trade-off between what investment you want to do in terms of protection. And so while you're doing that, you also need to prepare your team you have a proper incident response, proper detective controls, and proper containment of a problem or an issue, so that you're back to BAU as soon as possible. So I think the strategies work, both ways. You need to be proactive, but you need to have proper crisis management training done, proper engagement with all stakeholders, so that you don't have a sense of panic when any disaster strikes, and you do it in a very calm and professional way in terms of handling that situation and get back to normal. Okay. So I guess it's both.
Both. Mr. Rao, I'd like to come to you on this. This is version 3, version 4 of an organization that has matured and spent time on this. How do version 1 companies that are just starting out, deal with this?
Yeah, I think historically it's been reactive, right? It's a bit like how you get information that's, we used to get business intelligence, which are just reports that, report what happened. And now it's about predictive analytics to kind of think about what could happen, who is the likely fraudster and who's likely to get defrauded and stuff like that. So things have moved. Okay, to answer you, I think the way it got started, and even in my own experience in the last several years, the business starts because they have a business to run, not because they're doing information security, right?
Right.
And soon they start to realize that they have risks and they could have a lot of losses. So then you institute processes and procedures. It's not a governance conceptual thing, it's a process to prevent a specific risk, and that's how you kind of start off. With the operational processes, and which evolves to strategy, and then it goes on to governance. So that's been my experience. You just start off by instituting a few procedures to block the possible problem areas, and then you start to realize this cannot be piecemeal. It needs to have an overall policy and governance, and then it moves.
Still a longer drawn battle for smaller companies.
It's a more conceptual kind of thing,
Okay. Subhash?
Smaller companies, the question was on smaller,
It's more really proactive versus reactive. How would you look at it? And my question to Mr. Rao was really, how do the smaller companies deal with this? If you've not matured your policies and compliances to reach that level.
See, it's both ways. One really can't adopt a security strategy which is either only proactive or only reactive. traditionally, the security model has always been emphasis and focus on preventive. However, there is, with maturity, as you go from version 1 to version 2, 3, wherever one is on the maturity curve, one realizes that no matter what are the steps one takes to put in place preventive controls, there is always that element of something hitting you, which is beyond what you had comprehended. Therefore, it is imperative that there is a very, very clearly defined strategy so that responsive measures kick in a systematic manner. This is possible through putting in place well-articulated response plans.
Right.
We are all aware of DDoS attacks. Thankfully, it has not hit the Indian shores in a big way. But literally every large international bank has faced DDoS attacks of varying intensity. Yeah. So for a large institution, it is very well worth the effort to define and articulate what is going to be the response mechanism in the event of such an event.
I'll just add to it, it just struck me. You can look at the kind of investments going into information security. Historically, there's been only about 10% of the spend going towards control, and 90% has been about blocking.
Right.
We put in firewalls, we put in other things and say, don't allow business to do certain things, don't allow certain accesses. And now we have to change that because, after all, we have to be business friendly as well. And I'm finding that, I would say 30, 40, maybe more % is going towards monitoring,
30 to 40.
which is a more proactive, allow the business to go through, monitor, and then identify the specific areas of risk. So I think that's changing.
Okay. Amongst your clients, when it comes to fraud, obviously you wake up when there's a case of fraud, but are the preventive measures kicking in way before? Are you happy?
I think if you look at the fraud scenario in India, if you look at technology-related frauds, I think the situation has drastically improved in the last 2 or 3 years, thanks to regulatory push, which introduced additional controls on online transactions, or a lot of technology induction happened on internet banking and so on. I think the fraud scenario has really improved. It required some triggers initially, but I think the regulatory push was the most conclusive part of it. But going back to the point of how the organization will address risk, I think that's where the role of the governance body, that is the board, comes into play, where they get an accurate estimate of what risks they are facing and then create those management structures which will deal with those risks. And I think probably by and large we see that happening with risk committees and chief risk officers, or the roles getting created of enterprise risk management and so on. I think we are seeing a rapidly improving scenario.
Because that was my next question to you. I mean, you start with compliance and you effectively make it into governance and you make it far more structured. So I was wondering, what are the kind of discussions that are going on within the boardrooms now? Is there a far greater push? I mean, within the financial space, I mean, there is no option really. It's best to institute this. But in allied industries, is this conversation being replicated?
I think, again, as Aruna said, they have to run a business, and then whatever happens there, whatever risks are identified, those will get addressed. So risks in other sectors are probably not as salient. So there, the investment and the evolution would be probably slightly behind financial services. But I think by and large we are seeing a common approach across.
Thank you very much once again, gentlemen. Thank you, ma'am. It's been delightful having you here.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Thank you.
Burgess Cooper, CTSO, Vodafone, later took over the mantle and moderated an engaging discussion on BYOD. Bring your own device or bring your own disaster. The event also saw issues like vendor risk management, enterprise mobility, and security code reviews addressed by various industry leaders. The event concluded on a fun-filled note with a quiz conducted by Sumit Thar of Hewlett Packard.